is people of color any different from colored people? As a non-native speaker, the difference isn't apparent to me at all. Wasn't colored people derogatory less than a century ago? Why are Americans using a term that sounds barely different from it and say it's actually for a good cause? Had this explained to me in terms of disability. Years ago. In the UK, we used to say disabled people. And then we moved to people with disabilities. The shift is to highlight that said people are people first. And their appended characteristic disability. Color. Whatever second. People becomes the important word. Non-native as well. But I've always figured that colored people kind of sounds like the white human would be the real or default human. To which color was then added figuratively. Meanwhile, people of color sounds more like the fact that there are people that have color as their default state. The current term will be seen as outdated and derogatory in a decade. Much like the last one. And the one before that. Person-centered language. In South Africa, colored people are a specific race where people of color just indicate the color of a person's skin. Put simply, ugly historical connotations. Honestly, they aren't different at all. Just say I'm black. Nothing more. Nothing less. That's how I look at it. Being called colored or a POC, it's just like to broad in a sense. Back in the day, black PPL were referred to as colored by a racist system. Segregation, although POC is now a term to describe those who are not white. In time it'll become a derogatory term. It's trendy. In 15 years the phrase will become racist because a new one will be invented. Wrong place to ask this question if I'm honest. I can tell this thread will turn incredibly sarcastic while others saying people are just so sensitive. Best to just read research yourself sometimes. Do white-skinned East Asians count as people of color? The other day I asked my wife to make me a sandwich of ham. Would you believe she brought me a ham sandwich? I might have to divorce her. I think the whole thing is stupid. Treating white as default and everyone else as colored, whether you actually say colored or person of color, is idiotic. There's no difference between the two. And society will come to realize that in a few years. Liberals rephrasing the same exact thing and pretending there's a difference is extremely lol. Form over substance is like the defining feature of this generation. It's about connotations. The term people of color doesn't have the same negative connotations as colored people. Many now associate the latter with segregation but not the former. I might be wrong. But this is how I have come to understand the difference between the two. Colored people was used by white folks to separate everyone from themselves. People of color is used by everyone else to separate themselves from white folks. Social pressure to say things the right way or come under the suspicion of those who know what's the right and wrong way to say things at risk of being labeled negatively. At least in the US. It's due to historical context. The term colored brings to mind an era of American history where much of the US was racially segregated and people mostly in the South had to eat at separate establishments, drink at separate water fountains, use separate bathrooms, etc. Oftentimes this separation was demarcated by the terms white and colored. Also depends on the culture. I'm South African. We have an entire ethnic group called coloreds. If you told them they weren't coolords, they'd clap smack you. It's a beautiful culture and amazing people. Even the term people of color is stupid as fuck. It doesn't even tell you what I am. It just tells you what I am not. Which is in a global sense a small percent of humans. The Caucasian people. It's as if all juices in the market except one were just labeled not mango juice. Like, what juice is this? Oh, it's not mango juice. People with a distinction foregrounds that they are people first rather than a class. Also, all etiquette titles and protocols are in many ways arbitrary and change over time by society. Social changes. If you have to think about how to title someone, then you have thought about it. And using the correct title demonstrates that you are polite. If you don't think about it and use the wrong title, you are not polite. Objectively. I don't know, but at the moment I'm wearing jeans of blue. It's stupid. People are people. What's color got to do with it? The very fact one says people of color shows they are being treated differently. Ask the NAACP. It's not any different. It's just a dumb way for people to feel like they're doing something about discrimination without having to actually do anything of substance. It's really not, but people like to pretend it is. Frankly, I find it just as offensive. It moves the accent from the color to the person. Short answer is it isn't. Americans are just fucking daft. They have themselves tied in knots over this shit. Black people are black. White people are white. That's all there is to it. What annoys me more is the African American nonsense. Elon Musk is an African American. Beyoncé is just an American. To me, saying colored people makes it seem like being white is the default. Same goes for other outdated terminology. Saying people of with etc. just sounds a lot better. Yeah, it's called People First language. It's a small way to help us remember we are people first. And the descriptor comes after. We're all equally people. People first. Child with autism is better than autistic kid. The people these terms were made for get to decide what is derogatory or not. Because colored people was a term chosen by white people. And people of color is a term chosen by non-white people. So when you say people of color, you are acknowledging the person first in the phrase structure. Whereas colored people acknowledges the color of the person before the person themselves, and we all like to be seen as humans first rather than as a combination of our traits. Hopefully this helps. People first language. Sad but necessary to remind even linguistically that they are people first and have an inherent worth regardless of any other factors. They are both dumb. People are people. Doesn't matter. It will change again soon. It's impossible to keep up tears of joy. It's a way to specifically exclude white people, for reasons. We don't say colored people anymore. Everyone is colored. The real answer is because people used colored people derogatorily. People of color, people with different skin color from different continents. Colored people, people that's been colored by paint for artistic reasons. That's what comes to my mind. It just keeps changing. People of color will be offensive in 20 to 30 years. Mentally retarded was the politically correct way to say slow. Now it's intellectual disability. As it becomes mainstream to describe something, people feel uncomfortable talking about intellectual disability will be considered offensive. It's just the way it is. I get the confusion. I got scolded for using POC instead of black person on here, and I was super confused. I thought POC was the most respectful way to the community. There is absolutely no difference. It isn't PC gone mad.